Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hipfire podcast. This is the 25th episode, and today we'll be talking about recapping the Kickoff Classic that we saw this past weekend. Just kind of giving our overall thoughts and some of the players that looked good. We're not going to break down each match individually because they're preseason matches, they don't hold that much weight, but we still saw some pretty cool stuff. And obviously, also this past weekend, we saw the group draw happen. So we're going to break down the groups a little bit and give our input on which group we think is heavier. Hint, it's Group B. And then we'll also talk about the schedule that got announced as well. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of AM news with the Challengers Cup upcoming and some more info for the Elite Series. But yeah, to start it off, why don't we talk about the Kickoff Classic? So Yas, what was your biggest takeaway or kind of first impressions from the game?
So just before we get into the Kickoff Classic, I just wanted to let you guys that are listening early on that we have a Spotify account now.
Oh yes, true.
So if you prefer to listen on that platform, you can go check it out there. So we can accommodate for all types of listening. In addition, we are currently on 93 subscribers on YouTube. We really do appreciate all the support on both that and our Twitter. If we get to 100 subs, that'd be pretty cool. So if you do enjoy the content we're creating, feel free to like and subscribe. And but yeah, starting with the Kickoff Classic, obviously this weekend, it was very entertaining. It was nice to see the teams go up against one another in this format as opposed to just watching them on Scump stream. I think the people that impressed me in particular, obviously the rookies, as we saw, Fire and Neptune were very impressive. I wasn't aware that Fire was going to be the flex on Paris, so that was something that really intrigued me, and he looked very comfortable. Him and Aqua both on that roster really shined through and were key in their win against the London Royal Ravens, which wasn't a really easy series for them. I mean, the first hard point they ended up taking pretty comfortably. Aqua dropped 33, Fire dropped 22. They both went positive. They ended up losing the S&D and in control, but the hard points were where they reigned through. Again, Fire 31 and 26, Aqua 29 and 23. I think Aqua was the only player that weekend, or one of the few, or the first at least, to have hit 100 kills in a series, which is pretty impressive. I think it shows that maybe he's back to that form that we once saw him, during the Jetpack Call of Duties. He had an up and down year last year. I think individually he didn't perform that poorly, but I mean, given the team he was on, you weren't going to expect much from that roster. So with this team, I'd expect more, and he definitely proved it. But what did you see, Seth?
Well, so Yasser and I've been so caught up in the AM scene. I haven't watched a lot of scrims to be honest. So I was going into this kickoff kind of dry, and I generally knew which teams were rumored to be better than other teams and stuff like that. But one of the kind of preconceptions that I had, not based off of scrims, just based off of how well I know the guy, is for Illy. I really thought this game felt good for him, and the 4v4 would suit him better, especially in S&D. And well, I was right. I mean, anybody that had any doubts about Illy were kind of silly because he's ridiculously good, and he pulled off the first 1v3 of the year. So I mean, he also looked great in the control as well. And hardpoint Shotzi really stands out, but that's not going to change. But Illy was definitely serviceable. So I think we're going to keep seeing. I know New York was playing with a substitute player and yada yada yada, but 1v3s are still impressive regardless in Search, and I think that's the thing we'll see all year. Not just from Illy. I think we'll see a lot more 1vx's in general, just because it's 4v4 versus 5v5. So it's just something about that makes it seem like you can clutch more. It doesn't seem as unreasonable anymore. And so yeah, seeing Illy pull off the 1v3 clutch was not really a surprise, but it was also just nice to see. I expect him to have a really good year this year, maybe even MVP conversation kind of year. So to see him start out so well was pretty cool. And then also Neptune, the other major rookie that we saw this weekend play. I was surprised when Havoc got benched for Neptune. To be honest, I'm a huge Havoc fan. I think he provides a lot for a team in S&D, and he's a good entry sub as well. So it was kind of shock for me, especially because I heard that Florida was doing pretty well at the beginning of the year. I know they kind of fell off in scrims, but it was still a surprise. But Neptune, when he saw him play, you could tell they made the right decision. I mean, maybe it should have been Slacked instead, but regardless, they made a good decision in starting him at the very least because he is quite talented. There's a couple of moments where he would get a 2-piece here, a 3-piece there, and it was just instincts. He has good instincts, and he has the the movement, and obviously, on Checkmate, there's that famous clip of him just standing on a plane,
Yep.
like off the wing. So
Jesus.
yeah, I don't know if he's like what it is about these Halo guys, but they'll always find like unintended sightlines. But he does look very good, and I'm excited to see him play. And the other guy that really impressed me was Bance. I know that we talked a little bit about Insight before being the sub for Toronto, and how we'd expect Insight maybe to replace Methods if Methods doesn't perform well enough, or something like that. But preseason, I actually thought that Insight could be a replacement for Bance because Insight has ran Flex in the past, like early Singularity days last year, and he's also a pretty good in-game leader. So I thought if Bance wasn't performing, Insight would be a good replacement. But it looks like that's not needed because Bance was really, really good and respawns dropping like 230 bombs. And I know the S&Ds weren't great out of Bance, but
Yep.
Bance historically has been a good S&D player. It was kind of the reverse problem last year where Bance would play well in S&D but not really keep up in the respawn. So to see him starting out so hot in the respawn's a good sign because I think the S&D will be fine for Bance. He's a seasoned vet. He'll be fine in that game mode once they get more reps on it and everything. So, but yeah, to see him slaying was a really good sign because when he's hitting that top form that we know Bance can hit, it's scary because we're going to get good performances out of Cammy and Kleenex for sure. And Zinni had a bit of a rough weekend, but playing against Minnesota's ARs is not easy, and I expect Zinni to get better as well.
Just
But
just
yes,
one
yeah,
more
we
thing
can
to
go ahead.
interject about the bands. Just one more thing. From what I could tell coming into the kickoff series, he was actually going to be the second sub. From what I saw on
Oh,
scrims, it was
okay.
Cammy that was running flex. So when we saw him like with the XM4 at times, I think he still was the second sub for the most part, but we saw him with the XM4 and we saw him fry. So maybe that might be a sight of or an indication of what's to come, where he might be the flex going forward. But I agree with your sentiment that Camming Clarence, they're going to fry. You can get a guy like Bance and Zinni to like just not necessarily be such a detriment to the team. And not to say that Methods was this weekend. He did have a bad weekend, but if they can sort of keep up, then you're going to see them take series. I mean, they only lost the S&Ds 6-4, 6-5. They could have easily taken that series. The only game mode they looked horrible in was Control. So not too
But
concerned
also,
with this.
I was going to add, like, also losing 6-4, 6-5 to Minnesota S&D is not bad at all. Like, Minnesota's a great S&D team
Yeah,
as well. So,
100%. And the last player you want to highlight was obviously Dashi, and rightfully so. Obviously, I think we both had our reservations about this roster going into the season, whether Dashi was going to be the right fit. Just given the fact that it looked like when guys like Arstides left and Pristine left, there's a bit of question. And even the way they lost last year is like maybe they wanted to focus on someone that I can't even remember what the exact words were, but someone maybe that was going to help them in the in-game leader department, help them with their fundamentals. Someone that a guy like Dashi, maybe we're too harsh on him in terms of the way he plays and how he's really cracked out. And obviously, he's an incredible S&D player. But I think that was something that I missed on for sure. And as you can tell, very dominant weekend, especially at a Dashi. You had 23 in the hard point. You went 6-6 in S&D, and then again 20-16. I mean, the whole team really looked unstoppable throughout that entire series against the 100 Thieves. And with regards to the in-game leader, I think Envoy has done a good job, along with the entire team, really of playing fundamentally correct and learning the game, even without a guy like Center, who I believe was sick for a while. So big props off to them. They seem to be look like quite the force. I'm very curious to see how they'll fare against a team like Dallas. Obviously, they won't play them, which we'll get to later on, or like teams like Atlanta later on. But very, very positive signs so far.
yeah, just one more thought on Dashi there. Yeah, the
Yeah.
reason why I wanted to highlight him is because uh, when you talk about like an off-season move, right, and you talk about dropping RCDs, I'm pursuing, I guess, twins, right? The twins for a player, that player better play well. Like you're getting rid of Alec, who's top AR for another player. So whoever steps into that role has got to be like high caliber. And there's no question about Dashi's like skill. Like we know Dashi's a top quality skill player. That wasn't really the problem for us when we talked about this roster preseason. For me, it was more: is it going to be motivated consistently to play at a high level? Is it going to be like keeping up with the comms? And it also is it going to work with formal and two ARs? But so far it looks great, and he looks comfortable, and he also kind of has a license to do not really whatever he wants, but he has a license to use his skill to its full potential. Where I feel like on other teams he didn't really have that. Like when you play with the team he played with last year, Optic, it was a bit clunky with roles, and it didn't seem like he really had, full autonomy to kind of operate around the map like he wants to. But with this team, it kind of feels like he does, and I think it's a trust thing. I think that these teammates trust Ashley to make the right play. They played with him before, and they know it works. Versus the last year, where maybe they didn't trust him as much, and they wanted them to play him more as a team. I feel like if you trust Dashy to be Dashy, and the best part about Dashy is that the fact that he can roam and he can pick up kills wherever he goes, basically, because he's that good of a Slayer. So I'm sure they have structure in place. I'm just saying, like, giving
Yeah,
him, confidence in him and freedom in him is a good thing.
100%. No, 100% agree. But yeah, no, it was a great weekend. I think we're both looking forward to how the regular season will look. And talking about the regular season, we got our groups.
Yep.
So when these groups were first announced, or at least they showed the video, there are a couple of things that were a bit perplexing, or confusing, to me personally. Obviously, these picks seem to be done before any of the qualifier matches took place. And with that being said, I don't think these qualifier matches should be the end all be all. They shouldn't necessarily influence how the draft or of groups should have gone necessarily. But some things of note. Obviously, Dallas picks Optic. That was no surprise. That was what everyone expected. And then FaZe picked LA Thieves again. Not too surprising there. That's kind of what everyone expected. And then we expected Florida and Minnesota for the most part to go next. However, I didn't expect Florida to be the one that or rather, let me back up. Optic was the one that picked after Atlanta, and they picked Minnesota. Hex says formal wanted between one of the two, and he picked Minnesota, which I disagree with. I think Florida would have been the better roster even before the phase game where Florida beat them. I still think Florida was a stronger team overall, even with Neptune. But either or, they picked Minnesota. And the most confusing part, if you actually go back in the broadcast, you hear JCap say, okay, the next team we're going to pick to be in the other group is Awake, because we want to see Wake go up against Crimsix, and everyone laughs. And then I didn't catch this, but so Florida, he said he wanted Florida to play against Crimsix, but he sent them to the other group. He's not going to be able to play against Crimsix. So I don't know what was the point of that. You said I want Wake to play Crimsix, and then you send him to the group where he can't play Crimsix. I don't know what JCap was thinking, or if that was taken out of context. But yeah, that's how the first couple picks. But what did you make of the rest of the picks, Seth?
I think it's tough because New York, it's tough without Hydra, without the roster they wanted. So I'm not so surprised they fell a little bit. I think teams didn't really know what to expect from them, but I don't know about that. Like I think that okay, Group B is obviously stacked, but I think it's stacked because of the bottom end. Like I almost feel like New York is arguably more competitive and better than some of the teams at the bottom of Group B. So in that respect, I think the groups are Group A gets a little bit of beef there. But the problem I have is with London and Surge, because I think Paris and Ultra are better than London and Surge. So you're adding like 2 extra teams onto Group B that are better than 2 on Group A, so it kind of just flips it up. I would have rather had seen, you flip London and LAG. I'd have been fine with that. And then at the bottom end, you can't really do much because you're gonna have like 2 bottom teams. That's gonna happen. I do think it's a little bit weird though that Seattle got picked last. They're good players. Like they may not be showing it right now in scrims. I guess that's what they're going off of, so it's fair to play. But these guys are good, talented players. I don't know who I would have picked last, to be fair, but a team that formed like a month ago gets picked before a team that's been there from the start. One of the first teams announced, like Paris gets picked before Surge. It's just a little curious. But that's my.
I was going to interject there. I do understand why Seattle's picked last. Actually, I think a lot of it has to do with scrims. I mean, from what we're seeing in the scene, is that there are pro teams that are actively looking for scrims outside of Seattle. Like they're not going to scrim Seattle because Seattle's just not good practice for them. from what I understand, or they
but do
just
you
don't
not
want to
think that?
teach Seattle.
But I know what you're saying, but do you not think that like these players on Seattle are going to get better? Like I don't think that their current form is indicative of the whole year. Like I think these guys will figure it
Yeah,
out. Like they're good
but like
players.
you realize these groups are only going to be for the next 3 weeks or
That's a good
next three
point.
home
Actually, that's
games,
a really good point. You're
right?
right.
And
Yeah.
so like that they're like they can get better, but I don't think they're going to get so better from playing amateur teams to the point where they're going to be able to, contend against Dallas or
Yeah,
LA or Minnesota.
but how does London get picked that high without a fourth? Like,
Yeah, London was a bit of a curveball from Matura. I wasn't expecting that. I would have expected him to say New York, Ultra, or Paris, quite frankly,
yeah.
because I think those three teams are ahead. I do happen to know who London's new pickup because they
Oh.
will be picking up someone. I can't say on podcast,
Oh, boo.
but I mean, if you look out there, you can pretty much guess who it is.
No, I'm pretty sure I
Um,
have a idea who it
I
is.
think I think most people can guess who it's going to be. Um, which is interesting. I mean, obviously, again, that'll be a whole different scenario because they have to scrum with someone they haven't played with before in the
Right.
amateur scene. So that's a struggle in itself. So a bit confusing. Again, Group B is going to be the most difficult. And just to give an idea of how this plays into the major, which will come up. So the first three seeds they make it into winners. So that's how it works. The first in each group gets a first round bye, and then second seed of Group B plays third seed of Group A, and vice versa. So, in other words, a team like in Group B, essentially, if you're a team like Ultra or Paris, you're gonna have to beat out Florida, Optic, or Face for that top three spot. Otherwise, you're starting in losers at the first major, and that's pretty depressing. That's why having these groups are so important. Like for Group A, like if I'm a team like New York or like London, like that third spot isn't out of reach. Like it's not like impossible for them to beat a team like Minnesota and make it there. So I think it just shows that how important these groups are, especially for those teams that are sort of on the cusp. I think it'll be very interesting. But yeah, that's just overall thoughts on the groups. I'm really curious to see how they play out.
Well, I was going to add also, like, this is a good opportunity for Seattle. Like, they got disrespected. They got picked last, right? That sucks. But also, in your group, you have London without a, I guess they have the fourth now, but in theory, right? Like a new player they get to figure things out with. And the same thing goes for New York. You have, like, two guys who wasn't supposed to be on the roster, and they're going to be figuring things out as well. So if you're Seattle, like, it's actually
That's true.
assuming you can get scrims with competitive teams, um, it's a really good opportunity to try to sneak a third spot. And Minnesota's a tough team to beat, and the top two I don't think you're touching. But if you can upset Minnesota and try to knock off the other ones, it's a really good opportunity. And then for Group B, like this is a huge. I think for Ultra, this is a really good way to start the season off. I think that it'll kind of establish, what they need to improve on it and where they are competitively. Because I think a lot of people have a lot of question marks for Ultra because they know that they're competitive, but they aren't necessarily the top tier of teams. So I actually think we'll get a pretty good idea, even in the stages, just how good, like kind of like Minnesota and Ultra are the kind of the teams that we expect to be competitive, but we don't necessarily have at the top. That's kind of my takeaway from the groups.
Yeah. One last thing about Seattle. It turns out they played Florida today, and they're
There
playing
you
pretty
go.
well. So there is something to note. But yeah, I mean, I agree that Ultra. I mean, on one hand, it's good because look, I could practice against these top teams in a way. But at the same time, it's like you start off slowly in these majors. I wonder how it's going to impact you later on
Yeah, that's
when it
fair.
comes down to champs. But yeah, that just wraps up our thoughts on the stage one groups. And before we go, we're gonna recap or rather give our thoughts on this upcoming Challengers Cup, which is going to be a pretty pivotal one, especially in the North American scene, as what we are coming to see is that, or what we expect is that we have Cup 5 this weekend, and then, from my understanding, week 1 of the Elite Series qualifiers will take place February 6th. So for season 1, so that's the weekend after. So we have Cup 5 this weekend. Next weekend's going to be the Elite Series qualifier, and then a couple days after the qualifier is when season 1 of the Elite Series begins, February 9th. So, a lot of Call of Duty for a lot of these teams in very quick succession. And we've seen a lot of team changes, especially in North America. We saw, Sib and I believe it was Jimbo split off with Hollow and Cells. Phantom and Rex found two of their own players. I can't remember the players off the top of my head. But you see that you saw Hire going through roster changes. A lot of teams in NA going through roster changes right now as people scramble to find the teams that they want to compete with in the late series. I mean, hell, even Aches is competing with. I think he was competing with Haggy. I don't know if that's the case anymore. It sounds like he's competing with John and Mox in Lacefield,
Ooh.
which is again nice to see John back in the scene. I'm very curious to see how he progresses. Obviously, it doesn't look like he's been playing the game too long, but that being said, it looks like he's picked it up pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So
it's John, bro. It's John.
yeah, like he's gonna be good. I'm very curious to see um, how quickly he'll progress. Because if he does, like, there's no chance that a team's not gonna say, "Hey, like, let's just get John as a sub." Like, why wouldn't we? Realistically, so very curious to see how that goes. Again, I expect Wester to win this next cup without a doubt. Maybe the Subliners Academy or BBG or Triumph might be able to contest them, but I don't see it again. Like we've gone through another roster mania again, and it's like, what did you expect? Like you can't expect to do better as Wester continues to improve. So that's my thoughts on the scene. But what do you think, Seth?
Yeah, also just for Wester, right? Obviously, Paul got offered a spot. I'm pretty sure it
Yep,
was London,
true.
but
It was, yeah.
he turned it down and wants to stick with the team. And I completely understand where he's coming from because like
Yeah.
some people are saying like, oh, you don't want the contract, yada yada yada. It's not a permanent thing. He wouldn't be on London forever. And for him, they're winning right now. Like, why would you mess up the chemistry, mess up the flow? You're at the top of the scene, the AM scene right now. I think it's a good decision to make personally.
Yeah,
And
no,
also,
just to interject on that point, I don't know if you're gonna continue on Paul or not.
no, I was gonna. It's fine. You can go.
Yeah, no, there's one last thing on Paul. Yeah, like 100%, you're right. Like it was supposedly it was going to be a 14-day contract,
Yeah.
so he wasn't going to be guaranteed the 50,000 that you get as being a sub. Second, you have no idea when Zero is going to come back, and when he does, he will take your spot. So he could, that's such a short like window of time to show what you're capable of. And even if like show that you're talented, you're not going to be guaranteed that sub spot or that permanent like starting spot because there's going to come back anyways. And the worst part about it is um, someone would come replace him on Wester, and Paul mentioned, whoever Wester picked up, they were not going to end up dropping anyways. So he's not guaranteed his spot on Wester when he comes back. So yeah, a lot of risk in that sense.
Yeah, like if Weston went out and picked up Glow Frosty and then he ended up frying, like he managed to stick with
Yeah,
him anyways. So yeah,
yeah,
I
like,
understand that. Yep. But that being said, though, like there is something to be playing for, especially if you're in North America. We talked a lot
mhm,
about how Europe and APAC it's hard because of visas and whatnot. But for NA, there's still a lot to play for in the MC. You're still playing for a sub spot technically, but you're also just playing for next season if there's an expansion. Because I mean, if they keep doing this all year and as an expansion team comes in, there's got to be some teams that are like, you know what, just screw it, we'll do it. We'll just pick up all four of them and see if they can do it again next year. But for EU, there's a couple of roster moves here and there. I know one of the Spanish teams went for Sucre, and Method's decided to focus on streaming, which for him is a great idea. He gets tons of stream viewers. But
mhm.
regardless, I think the EU scene is less wild with Rostermania, but there's still a little
Yeah.
bit. Um, and as long as those top four teams hopefully can get more ironed out, because there's I'm excited for the Elite Series. I want to see these top teams play each other, and there's not. I don't think this one matters as much for EU, just because we're getting a pretty good idea of who's going to be in that Elite Series, and versus
Mhm.
NA where it's like it's still a complete crapshoot. So my kind of last thoughts to wrap up that kind of the cups is there's mostly for NA. There's a lot of new teams, and there's going to be because of that, there's going to be a lot of seeding issues. We're going to see a lot of good
Mhm.
teams play each other early because the pro points got all messed up because everyone decided to hop teams again. Um,
Yep.
and so we're going to see really good teams finish top 64, top 32. I mean, it's going to happen. But just to focus on the Elite Series, I think it's a good thing because of that. Like the Elite Series is crucial and important because in these cups, people keep finishing top 32 and top 64 that shouldn't really be finishing there because of seeding. So the Elite Series provides an opportunity for these teams to qualify for it and not have to play a really good opponent for top 64, right? This way you're playing good opponents like for top 12, basically, right? So I think it's a really good thing that the scene is doing, and it's good for the CDL to do that because it's just it sucks for the guys that don't make it out of top 32 or don't make it to top 8 and don't make it to Sunday because they're
Yeah,
not going to get viewed on like iHealth stream, which is basically the only chance you get to get some viewership because the
yeah,
CDL won't stream stuff.
yeah, pretty
So big
much.
ups to
So
the Elite Series.
no, 100%. I'm very excited. Like you said, EUC 100% should be probably more entertaining than NA in the sense that you could. There's like a serious like chance that like 5 or 6 of these teams could easily win a Elite Series major, considering how talented and deep that scene is compared to years past. I think one interesting thing note about the EU scene, obviously a bit of drama, was Chain.
Oh
He
right.
had left his team, went to Singularity for a couple days. What it sounded like, I know Chain's had issues with the guys on Singularity in the past. It sounded like those issues hadn't been resolved before he joined. It was just a matter of Singularity had a couple, like I think 3 straight cups where they didn't perform. They didn't even get the top 4, which is unacceptable for them. So they dropped the Chain, picked up Chain, tried that for 2 days, and they dropped Chain as a result of how their scrims were going, I suppose, and re-picked up Detain. And you saw Chain on Twitter, jokingly or not, post a video about showing or telling people Singularity's breakoffs or their strats if you DM'd him or whatnot, which, like, I understand his frustration. Like, that situation sucks. I would have been pissed too if Singularity picked me up. And the thing is, he's not going back to his team with Whalers. That team has picked up Henry and has looked fantastic ever since. I believe they were smoking Team Warren scrims. I watched a couple of them, and they looked very dominant. So very curious to see how the team will play. But yeah, Chain's not going back to that team. I don't know where Chain's going to end up, and I understand his frustration. He left a good thing that he had was his team, placed top 4, went to Singularity, and now he's dropped. But you can't act like that, and so I think he'll understand that. But yeah, a little bit of drama in the EUC, and usually we're used to seeing it in NA. But be very curious to see if House Tarth will be able to repeat. How good will Joe and Lenny's team do, and where will the rest of them, show up in the standings? But this cup should be very entertaining on either side of the pond.
Yeah, and that kind of wraps up our thoughts for this podcast. And so, yeah, looking forward to the CDL matches starting on the 11th, right?
Yep, a little bit.
Yeah, CDL's match starting the 11th. We got interesting stuff coming up this weekend, and Elite Series coming up after that. So there's a lot of Call of Duty to be watched and a lot of Call of Duty to be enjoyed. And what a good title. This is a fun year. Personally, I think it's a great meta. Hopefully, Smoke's come back soon. But we have a good meta. We have a good game. A lot of action coming up. There's a lot to be hyped about. So stay tuned, and we try doing some smaller videos too in the future. Some like little trash talk here and there, maybe some clips and highlight them. So let us know if you want to see some smaller videos and kind of smaller content in the future and what that is, because we'll still kind of brainstorming different ideas right now.
Yeah, that should sum up our episode of the podcast. Always leave a like, subscribe, comment what you want us to do next, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yep. See you guys.
See you.